Okay, welcome everybody to Punch Kick Choke Chat. You're probably viewing this on a Thursday evening at some point when we're not doing a live show. Um, Sean Benson, as you can see, is not here. I am joined with the other two co-hosts, my two instructors, Sensei Nicholas Suino and Hanshi Gary Legacy. And we're also joined um, today with Melody Johnson. And she's a martial artist and instructor who specializes in research, teaching, and childhood development. We're going to do her bigger intro a little bit later. But one of the things we like to do, Sensei Johnson, is jump in right away with a question for you. Um, and then just let you run with that. And then we come back to some other housekeeping items. But so the question I want to jump in with you is you are the creator of SKILLZ, SKILLZ youth program. So really, I just want to ask you, what is SKILLZ and how has it impacted teachers, coaches, and most importantly, kids?
So, skills is a child development concept that we started integrating into our children's martial arts programs in the late 90s when we started realizing that how we teach children is very different than how we teach adults, or how we should teach children, I should say. And traditionally in martial arts, I grew up the same thing. We just said the Dungeon Dojo days in the 80s, where kids and adults trained side by side. And it was effective for the anomaly type of martial artists like myself, who really just embraced all the traditions of martial arts. But as we started getting into the 90s, and we had the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers that were inspiring children to jump into martial arts classes, what we were finding is that our retention levels were very, very low as we got to the more advanced levels of the martial arts program. And that was basically because we were taking what we teach adults and kind of watering it down for kids and realizing that it wasn't targeting a large market. It was a very niche market of children who were lasting throughout the program. So what we did is we started diving into science and psychology and trying to figure out how we can teach children martial arts in ways that helps them develop according to their stage of development. So essentially, skills is a reverse training concept. What we did is we identified skills that children were building based on their age and stage of development, and then we were plugging martial arts into that. So the original skills curriculums were originally created in the 90s. Then in the early 2000s, I started building them into manuals. We went online with our platform in 2013, which is where we started taking on licensing schools. And now we have over 1,000 schools in over 3 dozen countries. So it's been a great ride.
Yeah, I read that. That's very impressive. But so take us through, without divulging any trade secrets, people are going to see this, right? And maybe they're going to want to reach out to you and they're going to want to implement this program. Uh, Give us a couple of examples of, you got a youth program from, I don't know, like 3 to 6, 7 to 10, or whatever the breakdown is, for you. I'm giving you probably poor examples.
No, you're close enough. So we break them down, especially post COVID. We were breaking them down by age, but we're starting to transition into grade levels. So we have a program for your preschoolers, which are typically your 3 and 4 year olds, but we're even noticing just in the last 2 years that parents are holding their kids back from jumping into kindergarten until they're like 5 years old, some even 6. So we have our early skills program, which is our preschoolers. We have our basic skills program, which is early elementary, kindergarten, first grade. We have our core skills program, which is your second, third, and fourth graders. And then the extreme skills program, which are your middle schoolers, your fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, at least middle school here in Florida is how they divide them up. And every single program has 8 different skills according to their age and stage of development. And then we plug martial arts into that. So, for example, in our most popular program, which is basic skills, that's your kindergartners and first graders. The 8 skills are focus, teamwork, control, memory, balance, discipline, fitness, and coordination. So for each one of the skills, we plug in martial arts. So for example, for focus, in order for them to earn their focus skill stripe, they have to be able to punch and kick targets in the air, just teaching them spatial awareness and so forth. Another example for an entry level basic skill student for balance, they have to be able to, since I'm Taekwondo rooted, they have to do 5 kicks without putting their foot down. And then every belt level for each of those skills, it gets a little bit harder and a little bit harder. The other thing that we do with skills that makes it so different compared to most traditional martial arts programs is we utilize a lot of play-based strategies, game-based strategies, especially today. We're in a digital culture that takes away children's attention. Our competition is no longer really looking at other team sports. Our competition is iPads and tablets, and kids are starting to get more addicted to these devices, which means that children are having more of this dopamine and serotonin addiction, and they're depleted with oxytocin and endorphins, which are powerful neurotransmitters that lead to neurogrowth and development. So the way that we approach this is by making a lot of our activities play-based, game-based. So it gives them that dopamine and that serotonin boost, but it also helps develop that oxytocin, which is the social interaction that they get in class, as well as the endorphins, which is what they get from the actual physical activities, as opposed to sitting on the couch playing their video games and so forth.
So I guess we're gonna eventually have to do the intro, but I really like where this is going. As an instructor, I find it really interesting some of the things that you're saying. Um, what have been some of the changes that you've seen from kids and instructors? Like, what feedback are you getting? Even parents, like, what are they saying? Do you have any comparisons from people who came through traditional programs? And I mean, I know you're saying retention is greater, but what are some of the other benefits for the youth?
Well, so we're getting a lot of parents who are saying that they're noticing their kids' moods and behaviors are a lot better because we already know the science behind the pitfalls of children being on their devices and playing video games and being behind a television. As we mentioned, the dopamine overdose, the serotonin overdose. And when you overload those neurotransmitters in your brain, their brains become either horizontally disintegrated or vertically disintegrated, which leads to tantrums and meltdowns. So we balance that out with our skill-based classes where there's a lot of play in there, there's a lot of fun, high energy, and that is actually a mood elevator. So probably the biggest feedback that we get from the parents is that my child is having less mood swings and they're more confident and they're better versions of themselves. For the instructors, obviously the retention is a lot higher, but more importantly, the energy in classes are a lot higher. When people try out just a sample class planner and I say, give this a go in class, immediately they see the results. The parents who are there watching are saying, wow, that was so much fun to watch. Even the parents who are typically in the parent area that are on their phones are watching their kids having fun versus, a traditional martial arts class where they're just pumping out martial arts techniques, right? In front of an instructor. These types of activities that we're doing in class, the parents are putting down their phone and watching because they're seeing their kids having a good time, but also growing right in front of their eyes. So those have been some of for me, the more purposeful feedback that we're looking for with the skills curriculum is, we want the parents to enjoy it. We want the kids to enjoy it, but we want the instructors to enjoy what they do as well. We don't want them getting burnt out.
Hey, Sensei, I think I know, but I've been hitting the head a lot. So you said horizontally disintegrated and vertically disintegrated. I feel like that's me most days, but can you kind of explain for the complete dummy what you mean by that?
Sure. So when you look at the way the brain structure is, because I study brain science, I'm certified in interpersonal neurobiology, so I really understand how connection works from peer to peer, child to role model, and so forth. And I really dive into the science on what's happening up here and when a child is having these big behaviors. So if you look at the brain's divided upstairs. It's got two parts. It's got a downstairs part of the brain, which is your brainstem, which is where your amygdala is. It's the primitive part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that goes into the fight, flight, freeze, or faint mode when somebody is under threat. But it's also the part that regulates emotions. And then you have your upstairs part of the brain that's divided into two hemispheres, your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere. Your left hemisphere is your logical part of your brain, like the accountant. Your right hemisphere is the emotional part and the creative part, like an artist. So when a child, for example, has a tantrum, that's like when they know they shouldn't behave the way that they're going to behave, but they choose to do it anyway. Like, let's use just an at-home experience. I want ice cream for dinner. And parents say, no, you can't have ice cream for dinner. And the child starts having this big tantrum, but I want ice cream. And then the parent gives in That's a tantrum. So what's happening is the emotional part's going, I really want ice cream. The logical part's going, but don't throw a fit, don't throw a fit. And the emotional part's going, but I'm going to throw a fit anyway. The logical part no longer is connected with the emotional part. So they're what's
Mm.
called horizontally disintegrated. That's when a tantrum happens. Now it's interesting because a lot of parents, teachers, and coaches, especially in the martial arts industry, assume that a tantrum and a meltdown are the same thing, but they're not. A meltdown is when a child is so overwhelmed with their big emotions, there's no logical part even saying you probably shouldn't do that. You just lose it. I mean, we've all been there where we've been so emotionally overwhelmed by a movie, or for me, when I watch military dads come home and they surprise their kids, and I watch them show up at their kids' kindergarten class, I can't help but my tears come down. And when that happens, that's when the brain is vertically disintegrated. The amygdala, which is like the security guard, the fight, flight, freeze, or faint, kicks in and says, upstairs part, you're not allowed in. So there's no logic or reasoning that can even help tame that emotion. When a meltdown happens, the brain is vertically disintegrated and you have to get reintegrated. And sometimes that just takes time. I know that there have been times when I've been emotionally overwhelmed, and there's nothing you can say or do that's going to change my mind. If a child is having a meltdown because they want ice cream for dinner and you give them ice cream and they're still crying, that's more vertically disintegrated than horizontally disintegrated. I hope that kind of explains it in a way that doesn't nerd out too much in science.
I think I
Hey,
got it.
I love it.
Okay.
So we're gonna get into our introductions now, Sensei Johnson. So I'm gonna say thanks to everybody who's joining the show live on Zoom. Actually, wait, you're not joining live on Zoom or YouTube today. But if you're listening or watching later on, which you will be, our podcast platform is on everything. It's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. It's all the places you want to look for it. Um, it helps us if we don't get paid for this, so if you give us a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, it's going to help us. If you have some questions, I guess what I would say is on YouTube, put some questions on the YouTube when you watch this later. Put some questions there, and we'll make sure that Sensei Johnson gets those questions. And maybe if they're not totally stupid questions, because you can already tell she's an intelligent person. If they're not stupid questions, maybe she'll actually answer you. Uh, and I guess it's to you now, Sensei Suino.
Well, it falls to me to introduce the two gentlemen on this call that are part of the PKCC team. As everybody noticed, Sean Benson is off doing actor stuff, and so he's not here today. But folks who are here, I'll start with Hanshi Gary Legacy. I've known Hanshi Legacy, I think, since 1991 or 1992, when we were both at a martial arts seminar. I think it was in Boston. We started training a little Iaido in those days, and that's a pivotal moment because so many things that have happened since then are based on that. I teach a lot of martial arts all over the North America and the world, and most of the connections I made arise out of that single meeting where he liked kind of what he saw, and we started working together. And I'm happy to say that I have dozens and dozens of friends in the Legacy organization, and it's been a huge influence on my life. Hanshi Legacy is a 10th dan in karate. He teaches Shorin-ryu and also White Crane, and has become a lifetime friend as well as a martial arts co-conspirator. And I'm really happy to be able to be on this show with him. And then one of Hanshi Legacy's top students, Randy Dauphin, another co-host. We've been training together. I think it's getting close to 35 years now. I started out teaching Iaido to the Legacy group, and Randy is happy to point out that the first couple of times he hated it, but he's learned to love it. We still practice together, and both these gentlemen helped me sort of fumble along in the world of karate. Um, it's nice to be humble, and I'm always kept humble by their guidance and just seeing their example, what is possible in the world of karate. I'm lucky enough to have been training in some other martial arts long enough to kind of know what good might be, and these guys helped me along on the rougher path of karate. At any rate, we've been together a long, long time. We've done a lot of cool stuff, and as I like to say, we're just getting started. One of the places we're getting started is here on this podcast. And Sensei Johnson, welcome. I think Randy's going to say a few things about you so our audience can get to know you as well.
Yes, Sensei Johnson. So if I say anything that is incorrect, please just make faces and wait until the end of the introduction and then correct
Okay.
me. unabashedly any mistakes that I make. So Sensei Johnson began her martial arts journey in 1987. Even though she looks much, much younger than me, that's a couple of years before me. She probably is because she probably started when she was like 3. And I started when I was 18. So um, she holds a 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo under Grandmaster Super Dan Anderson. If you don't know who he is, go to episode number 3. He was our 3rd guest on Punch Kick Choke Chat, and you can watch that. She's also a 5th degree black belt in ATA and an ATA World Champion title in forms. She currently resides in St. Petersburg, Florida, with her family and her son. She's a mom. Uh, and she says that her son inspires her daily commitment to helping children thrive. Sensei Johnson has over 25 years of experience researching childhood development as it relates to sports coaching and parenting, as we were just talking about. Um, Her contributions began with the creation of the Little Ninja Preschool martial arts program, which has been implemented in thousands of schools worldwide. She has revolutionized the child's martial arts market with her age-specific curriculum and drills known as SKILLZ, SKILLZ, which are utilized in over 1,000 martial arts schools across more than 24 countries. That's incredible. And they set a global standard for excellence in child development through martial arts. Um, She's also a sought-after consultant and speaker on topics related to child development, teaching, and parenting. And like us, she has a podcast. You can go check it out. It's called the Melody Johnson Podcast. And I encourage people to go check it out and listen to it. It's audio only. At least the one I found was audio only, but it has a lot of great information there. So thank you so much for joining us, Sensei Johnson. Thank you for that first answer. We always like to start with you know, what was it that brought you into your first dojo? Why did you get into martial arts? Who was there? What did you like about it? And why have you stuck with it?
Well, first things first, I started in 1987 when I was 11 years old. So I know I look a lot younger. Working with kids keeps me young, but 49 years old. So thanks for that. And I hated it at first. I did not join martial arts because I watched the Karate Kid or Power Rangers or Ninja Turtles like some of the other kids and said, "Oh, I want to do that." It was in the 5th grade. I was a tomboy. I got bullied for my size, and my parents put me in martial arts to teach me discipline. And my first few months of martial arts were miserable. I started training at a taekwondo school at my parents' country club and a racquetball room with hardwood floors. And my instructor's name, this is no lie, his name was Master Slaughter, and he was an ex-Marine. And I spent many, many hours in knuckle push-up position or dead cockroach position just because I was one of the kids who didn't want to be there. And I had a lot of attitude in class. And I did not fall in love with martial arts until my first day of sparring when I kicked a boy in the head really hard. It was kind of the class bully, and looked over at my mother, who was usually very disappointed in me for my behavior, and she jumped up and was like, "Yeah!" And then my instructor gave me 2 points for the kick to the head, and I was like, "Wait a minute. Not only do I get to kick boys in the head, and my mom's cheering for me for once, but I get points too. This is the coolest sport ever." And from there, I became a lifelong martial arts practitioner. I just fell in love with martial arts, and I was very big into the tournament circuit, sparring forms, and so forth, and was an underdog. So when I won, it was awesome, and if I lost, it was based on size, and I was the only girl in the ring in those days. So there was a lot of advantage to being one of the only females, being very petite in the martial arts, and loving it and embracing it as much as I did.
Randy, you're
Yep.
I was coughing, so I muted myself. Did not unmute. But so then, what took you to Sensei Dan Anderson? How did you transition over there and meet him?
Through my journey in the martial arts and writing children's martial arts curriculum and speaking at big conventions like NAPMA, we bumped into each other in Los Angeles, and he had he came up to me. I knew exactly who he was. I was starstruck between he and Bill Wallace, Superfoot Wallace, who I had done many trainings with for my sparring and so forth. You know, I was starstruck and we hit it off and became friends. He was using my little ninja program in his school, and we just started communicating and staying connected with each other throughout the years. And after being connected with him for over a decade, he gave me the opportunity to earn my seventh degree black belt underneath him, which was a huge honor.
Nice. Well, what does that look like with him? Uh, by that I mean, did he make you Sensei Anderson type strikes me as the type of instructor that makes you do things to prove to him that you are um,
You know, I would like to say that he made me run like 12 miles a day for, you know, a year straight and so forth. No, that wasn't the case. I had shared with him my curriculum and my training regimen and everything that I was doing, and of course also the growth that I had in the industry in a short period of time when I launched SKILLZ, to how it got, the minute we surpassed 500 schools, it was within the first 4 years of running SKILLZ, and those types of accomplishments, he gave me a little bit more validation and credibility in the industry's eyes. So at first he offered just to give it to me, and I told him no. And then we kind of had conversations back and forth. I remember I was actually at the Vinoy. I don't know if you know who Randy Reed is, but I was at the Vinoy with Randy Reed doing some business talks, and that's when he called me and made this proposal. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks. I really want to do something insanely crazy to earn it underneath you. And we got off the phone, and Randy's like, are you kidding me? That's Dan Anderson. Whatever he tells you to do, do it. He's a living legend. I was like, you're right. So we got back on the phone and we had a long conversation, and we went through all the things that I needed to do. And then I hosted a big martial arts convention here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and had Ernie Reyes Jr. here and a couple of other people. And he presented it to me in front of everybody, which was a big honor to earn my belt through him in that way.
Sensei, what was your since that wasn't really the physical grind that you imagined, what was the toughest physical test that you ever had to go through?
Doing the half marathon in Clearwater, Florida was the physical toughest. So it wasn't just a half marathon that was on flat. In Clearwater, Florida, there's all these massive bridges that we had to run up and then run down, and I had to do it within a certain time frame. And I know that running doesn't sound very martial artist or a half marathon, but it was not the physical exhaustion that was the tough. It was the mental exhaustion. It was getting not even halfway through the marathon and already going over three massive bridges and knowing I still had another hour and a half of running to go and wanting to quit, and just trying to find any excuse in my mind on what I can do to quit. And I was with a couple of friends who were marathon runners, and they wouldn't let me. So that was the mental part was probably the toughest part, and it just made me realize that we all are a lot tougher than we think.
did you Setsuna want to go around the horn on that?
Yeah, we've talked about some of this stuff before, but Hanshi, can you reflect on one of the toughest physical tests that you've ever had? I know I've heard about some of them. Is there anything you care to share? Like a rank test or a physical event that you found incredibly difficult?
Uh, they were all difficult, right? But the one I remember the most was when I was a student of Richard Kim's, and he didn't pass me the first time. He said it wasn't my the test itself, but it was my time and grade. I had I was put off to have to wait like another year or so because he wouldn't allow us. There's this grid that he had, and if you hadn't spent that time, just like we use now, he, uh, I didn't spend enough time in that at that level, so I had to wait. And I think it was 5 years I had to wait. It was actually it was a fourth dan for 15 years. So at one time, but that
At
was
one
the
time.
one past that.
Yeah, but your fifth Dan grading was pretty tough, Sensei. And
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Varesta, yeah.
Yeah, what was that like?
Maybe Randy could tell you better because
Well, Varesta Sensei was from Iran, and he didn't apparently he didn't smile at all when Sensei was doing his katas, when Sensei Legacy was doing his katas or answering his history questions or anything. He just kind of sat there stony faced, and then the fighting started. And since he did pretty good in the fighting, and I was talking to Hunter Burkowski about this because he was the referee of the fighting for Sensei Legacy. He was the guy kind of orchestrating it all. And there was one time when Varesta Sensei smiled, and that was when Sensei Legacy had to fight Varesta's son, and his son hit Sensei late, and Hanshi Burkowski said to me, Randy, we all knew what was going to happen after that guy hit Sensei Legacy late. So Sensei Legacy broke his nose and thought that, okay, well, I'm not going to get my fifth Dan, obviously. But apparently Vresta got a big smile on his face, and Sensei got his fifth Dan. So, yeah,
Nice.
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. How about that? How about for you, Randy? What was one of the toughest physical tests you ever went through
my black belt grading was my toughest
for
test.
Showdown?
Yeah, for sure. That Sensei puts us through a really, really tough test. But, your the EIDO gradings you've made me do. I would say sometimes, at least for with you, Sensei, the prep I do for the grading sometimes is a lot harder than the actual grading. You have to do so many thousands of hours of training to get things ready for maybe the 10 or 15 minutes you're going to be by yourself on the floor to make it look the way it is. But the grading that Sensei Lacy puts us through is really tough, right? You do your 16 forms at a very high level, then you have to demonstrate a lot of those forms on another person, like the applications of the forms. You have to do basics for a really long time. There's a panel of black belts asking you questions. You're tired. You can't even say what your zip code is or your postal code. And then you have to start fighting. And for mine, I had 22 fights in a row, like just one after the other after the other. And you're thinking you're doing good for the first couple. You're like, I got this. And then you get into the middle ground where it's like, okay, I'm kind of holding my own here. And then you get to the end where you're mostly just getting smashed. And since they won't allow you to end until you score one or two really good techniques that would have been definitive techniques. But the thing I like about that, Suna Sensei, and I don't know, Johnson Sensei, you could chime in on this, is when I stand with all of the Legacy Showrunner black belts go through this test. All of us go through this test. And it creates this really cool experience when we all stand together because you're standing with everybody went through this test. We all went through it. So there's nobody standing there with a black belt wrapped around their waist that you're wondering, how'd you get that? Like, what's going on there, right? If they're wearing our crest and a black belt, they did that test. So maybe that's a good question for you, Sensei Johnson. How do you feel about testing when it comes to youth, adults? Is there value in it? Is there not value in it these days? You're an expert in this. It would be good to hear your opinion on this.
So for as an adult and as a traditional martial arts practitioner, I'm with you. I embrace those long testing days, the rigorous testing of doing forms all day. For my fifth degree test, whatever age we were, we had to do that many minutes of sparring. And I believe I was 34, 35 at the time, and so you had to do 35-minute, 1 minute sparring rounds. And I love that. Probably the dumbest thing that I've ever done was in that testing. Now that we're, just brainstorming, and I was doing my breaking, and I had done a palm strike board break through a brick, and it was, oh, I guess it was almost like a fluke brick because when I hit it, the brick just exploded. And my next break was supposed to be with my leg, and I was going to do a stomp kick, but I was like, oh, this brick was easy to break, so I had my buddy hold it up and did a spin hook kick on it, and thinking it was going to explode and it was going to razzle dazzle everybody, and I hit it, and then I landed, and the brick just went thump, and it broke, but it didn't do anything fancy. And I looked down, and my leg was all cut up. I shattered my ankle, and I still had to do weapons to finish it off. And during the testing, I had several people come up to me and were like, we need to care for this. And I said, no, I don't want to stop. This was, to me, I thought that was cool. I was living off of adrenaline. I couldn't walk for a couple months, but that mindset of really pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and all of the ups and downs of that experience, I loved. Unfortunately, it's not made for everyone. We're not all built this way, and especially children today, they're not built that way. So for our skills testings, it's not considered a traditional martial arts black belt. It's a skills black belt. So the testings, they still have an extensive amount of training and preparation work that they have to do, but it's nowhere near what I would say is expected of a really hardcore adult traditional martial arts testing. But what I love about it is that many of my skills black belt graduates then go on to do traditional martial arts and earn their black belts, and they tend to be the higher performers of their class and of that particular testing group because we've set the foundation for them in the skills program. We've built a love for the martial arts, so they have that mental grit to persevere through the traditional martial arts. So that's my take on black belt testings when it comes to children's martial arts compared to adult martial arts black belt testings.
What about testing in general, though, Sensei Johnson? Like testing for any belts or any, like, what's your feeling on it?
That's a
What?
great question. We've been doing a lot of mastermind talks about it with our council members, and a lot of martial arts schools that with skills are now calling them more evaluations. So they're more checkpoints. And as long as the students are meeting the physical, intellectual, emotional, and social criteria of that particular group, then they advance to that next belt level because testing today has such a stigma on it. If we look at, like, even just when we look at the educational system, Finland has rated the #1 educational system in the world, and they don't have any kind of grading or testing. And they tend to produce highly intelligent people, but they tend to be happier and more confident. So we're exploring that here over the next 5 years. How does that look with skills? Do we start to do what some of our licensed skills members are already doing and just utilize evaluations and getting away from what's called testing for them, and then have that type of format, the testing type of format, be more an advanced elite high-end curriculum that more of your anomalies take. And so we're seeing a lot of that. For example, we have some schools that have both the traditional program and the skills program. And these skills programs price points are geared more towards the average child, the average children's martial arts market, which is around like $199 a month here in for demographics. But then the traditional martial arts program for kids is priced at $299 or $399 a month. So you're getting parents who are well invested in those traditional martial arts at a much higher level. So the kids are embracing that a lot more. So, it's still kind of open for discussion. I love having these chats about where we're going in the industry and what it looks like for both kids and adults.
I'm really intrigued by that separation. Now, do you have schools where those two kind of coexist? They're in the same schools.
Yes, sir.
They pass by each other in the halls, so
Yes,
to
sir.
speak.
Yes, sir.
So that's really interesting. Like, I would, this is it gives me a little anxiety because I feel like one group might look, raise an eyebrow at the other group. Hey, you are not traditional. You're not serious about this. Like, what's the culture like in a place where when they serve both audiences?
That's a good question. It's almost like, I mean, this is going to be a terrible analogy, but you have your regular casino with your regular gamblers, and then you have your high rollers facility, rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And the high roller rooms, have the velvet rope, and they look a lot different, and they have a lot different type of amenities.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of martial arts schools who don't want to, who people like us who loved the traditional martial arts, but know that it's very hard to sustain a profitable business with traditional martial arts today, when it comes to people who are trying to capitalize in the children's martial arts market. Rent is expensive, payroll is expensive, everything is pricey. We're in inflation, which means that you have to have more students coming through your door. And in order to get more students coming the door, you have to teach the way that they need to be taught, not the way that you were taught. So it's for the schools that are accommodating a larger market, but also having this little niche in their studio, they get to satisfy both the ability to provide for their family, but also the desire to teach and keep those traditions alive. In
And
some schools, I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question. So,
yeah.
the schools who are doing that, they have two separate. They're separate. So they're in the same shopping center, but they have their skills studio, and right next door is your traditional
Okay.
studio.
Okay. So that's not really like they're walking next to each other in the hall and the students are looking at each other.
Not typically, no. Depends on your dojo, right? Depends on
Mm-hmm.
how it's set up, if you do have the
Mm-hmm.
hallways and so forth. But I tell you what,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that do, even if they're in the same building, for people who have the traditional uniforms and then the kids who are in the more non-traditional and they see those traditional uniforms and they go, what are they doing? I want to do that, which
Mm-hmm.
sparks that interest. And then it's like, well, Johnny, not everybody can wear those uniforms and earn those uniforms. It's very, very hard. It's very tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bigger commitment, and it's almost like the takeaway sale
Yeah. Yeah.
versus the traditional martial arts programs trying to keep the kids in, and then the kids don't. It starts to get too hard, and then they want to quit.
Yeah. Yeah. Randy, you were about to
Yeah,
say
I'm
something?
just I'll be honest with you, Sensei Johnson. A lot of the stuff that you're saying makes me feel, as a traditional martial arts instructor, it makes me feel uncomfortable, right? Like a little bit. Um, but that tells me I need to delve into it a little more. Like feeling uncomfortable is not a bad thing to feel. I guess my question is for you right now. When you're teaching, are you also teaching both? Are you purely on the skills side? And are you teaching both streams? Like, do you teach traditional martial arts and your program, or are you only teaching your?
So I'm not teaching at the moment. I sold my school.
Oh, I
So
see.
I sold my fifth school. I've opened and sold five schools altogether. The last school that I just sold, I sold over 8 years ago. So me
Okay.
personally, I focus on writing skills and I travel all around the world and I do child development seminars and workshops and I also do online courses and so forth. So I don't get to say firsthand experience that I am. I would say that if and when I do open up another studio, likely here in St. Pete at some point, I will likely do something where there is skills exclusive standalone studio, and then either I will train in a traditional martial arts on my own or work with somebody to collaborate using it as a feeder to that particular school. We just don't have a lot of traditional martial arts studios that fit my desire that I want to train in. Some of the traditional martial arts studios here in St. Petersburg, they're typically not up to date, and it's very hard to train at those types of schools when I've been exposed to the do's and don'ts of running a martial arts studio for many years.
Okay, so I'm going to hit you with a statement, Sensei Johnson, and I'd like your reaction to it. Um, and it's my statement that I make to parents when they come in. It's my value proposition to parents when they come in. And when a parent comes into my studio, they always have, well, number one, I always try and talk to the kids first and not the parents. Like, so, kids, mom or dad's holding the kid's hand, and then I'll always say, like, they're like, hi, I'm such and such. And then I'm like, okay, I just want to talk to your kid for a second. So then what's your name? Why do you want to do martial arts? And I ask them the questions, and, obviously I get everything from, I don't want to do martial arts to I want to be Batman to I want to, which I'm like, that's awesome. Any answer, I accept all the answers. But with the parents, they usually have some agenda because then I'll say, okay, what's your goal for your child, right? Like, what are you hoping they're going to get? Why are you bringing them here? And then you get the plethora, right? Oh, they bully other kids. Oh, they're being bullied. Oh, they're not very confident. Oh, they're never disciplined. They know they don't get anything done. Can you help with that? And my answer is always unequivocally yes. I can help with any of those things. And this is where I'm coming to the point where I want to get your reaction is they say, how are you going to do that with my kids? And I say, I'm going to teach them how to fight and I'm going to make them fight. And when they get punched in the head, they're going to become more compassionate. And when they are not disciplined, when they step back and they get hit, they're going to learn that they need to step forward and they need to block. And when they have to do a presentation at school and they've already had, physical interactions, they're going to be more confident when they step up. how when I say that to you, what are you thinking this guy's a caveman? Or are you thinking, um, and I guess
I mean, personally, I love it. I love it. I think it's great. From a business perspective, I think about that here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I would say that 10% of parents would embrace that mindset and say, yes, good. But out of that 10%, the minute their child comes across a challenge while you're teaching them how to fight or become overwhelmed and don't like it anymore and they tell their parents they don't want to do it anymore, I see a large percent of those parents pulling them out,
Mhm.
and a very small percent of those parents saying, I'm going to make you stick with it. And unfortunately, we've just had a shift from when we all started martial arts in the mindset. Like my mother was like, feel free to knock her teeth out if she talks back, right? This was in the 80s. Now it's just a complete transition. So although I think that's really cool and I like that mindset, it might it not might it's not sustainable in many demographics. Skills is in 1,000 schools. We just surpassed 3 dozen locations this year because we understand that, and because we understand that although what we want for the children and how we help those children is we have their best interest in mind, it's not always the most sustainable way to run a successful business you know
Yeah, no, I'm not. I, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure if I changed my approach, I would have more students. But I'm not sure that not sure that I'm going to change my approach.
If you don't need more students, then you teach the way you want to teach, right?
Right.
So
But
people
but on
come people come to skills not because they're already successful and they just want to follow the latest trends. A lot of people come to skills because they want to grow their business and they want to attract a bigger market, and they want to be able to pull themselves out of the business and work, teaching, and have their team members teaching. And, that's one of the hardest things is they can't work on their business. They have to work in their business. And even the instructors today are very different than you and I, than the people that are right here on this call. So when we talk about having other instructors run it, that's a very niche market as well when it comes to employees or team members that can teach the way that we all were raised as well, and do it in a way that retains the students for extended periods of time.
right, I'm not in no way am I trying to suggest that my approach is like the best approach. I'm just saying this is what my approach is, and I'm not trying to compare it to skills as better or.
Sure. Yeah. I love every approach. I think everybody needs to do what makes them the most fulfilled. And, but when people come to me and say, I need to pay my bills, then that's when we have to have a hard talk, about, okay, so what are you doing and what's your retention like? What is your enrollment process like? Those types of things.
So then what's the value proposition for a parent bringing their kid into the skills program?
So we utilize, we're not a martial arts studio is what we position today, especially post-COVID. We are a child development facility that uses martial arts as the vehicle to help them become the best versions of themselves. We target their physical, intellectual, emotional, and social needs. Every single drill we do applies science and psychology that help them build one physical skill, one cognitive skill, one emotional, and one social skill, and it's measurable to a level that the parents can see. And so when parents do come to you and say, I want my child to have more discipline, or I want my child to have more confidence, or I want my child to have better grades, we have specific science-backed information and content that we can share with them that shows them how we're going to accomplish it. But then we also can measure that as well.
So I have a question for you, and we'll go around the horn on this. It's going to be maybe a spicy question, Sensei Johnson. What do you
A
think
less spicy.
what do you think the malfunction is with parents today compared to when we came up in martial arts, right? Like you said, you're I can tell you love your mom, but because you were like jazzed when you kicked the kid in the head and your mom was excited, you were happy to get that from your mom. What's the malfunction with parents today? What could parents do different or better that would help their kids? And we'll go around.
Okay.
This is an opinion question. You'll have the most scientific opinion, but I want to ask Sensei Suino and Sensei
Do you
Legacy.
want me to go first or do you want me to go last?
No, I want you to go first because then
Okay.
we'll seem like cavemen. You'll seem like a scientist.
Well, first things first, unfortunately, I haven't spoken to my mom in 15 years.
Oh,
Oh,
So, because my mother was that authoritative, strict discipline type of parent. And although at some points there was a lot of value to that, I also experienced a lot of trauma growing up as a child because of her strict discipline. And that's kind of what inspired me to teach the way that I do teach, because I was always looking for acceptance from my mother, and I never really got it very often. So, when my eyes lit up when I said my mom was happy, that was one of the very first times my mother was proud of me. And so I don't have a lot of those stored in my memory. And I think what's different between parents today and parents from, our generation is that their brain banks are operating at a much lower level than in the past. If we look at just the way society is as a whole, between social media and access to information and technology and so forth, parents just don't have the bandwidth to deal with their kids the way that they dealt with them when we grew up. So they're less patient, they're more anxious, they have a lot more mood swings, and it's that in and of itself is an epidemic. Just even the way that parents understand how to raise their children. We have a society of a lot of uninvolved parents because they're too busy, they're overloaded with work. We also have a society filled with permissive parents who just kind of, they're lawnmower parents, helicopter parents, and give their children anything and everything. And we don't have enough authoritative parents who can lead their child with discipline, but in a way that helps them want to embrace that discipline in positive ways. So for me, one of the things that I see that is most effective when it comes to working with children is trying to focus on building behavior by desire versus behavior by fear.
I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people, when it comes to even other things in life, like sex, alcohol, these things, I think a lot of parents use fear to try and curb the behavior instead of education, especially when it comes to things that everybody does anyway, right? But anyway, I'm getting on a soapbox here. Sensei Legacy, what do you think the malfunction with parents are today? You've been teaching in martial arts for a long time. And so you've seen evolutions of parents through the 70s, 80s, 90s. Like, how's it changed with the parents and what could they do different?
Well, you asked me a couple of different questions there. Um, I would have to say that the laws and that have changed the parents a lot, because I remember getting the kick in the butt once in a while when I deserved it. And, the quickest 20-year brain is by a good slap in the bottom or something, that idea. But I wanted to touch on a martial art thing, where martial arts has been around for 8,000 years. And all the things that are being taken from the martial arts now. And I like what your answer was, that you said that uh, it was exercise that was oriented towards the martial arts. For instance, right now, I feel that true martial arts, true classical martial arts covers everything. But am I reading this right if I'm reading that you're teaching some of the skills like the Olympics, having really good kicking skills? It's like the Olympics. They want the Olympics to, the way it's going around right now, to run classical martial arts. Like you can't have your own tournament unless you register with somebody in Karate Ontario or something like that. And I find that's putting the change and putting the martial arts in the wrong hands. A guy who spends, if you're in the Olympics, for instance, you go to the Olympics every 4 years. How many years is a guy going to be a world champion? But a guy like Sensei Suino has been in karate 56 years or something like that. They're the ones who develop the most out of all body, mind, and spiritual growth of real martial arts. But I can see where you're saying that you're taking a part of the martial arts and using it to kickstart children and certain segments of martial arts to help people in certain growths and certain uh, parts of one's life. To, you know what I mean? So are they? If a person goes to a martial arts school with it being a self-defense, or what it is a martial art, how does one overcome the part of being attacked where they're doing martial arts with a referee and they have never really, when they face somebody, they're not going to care you do martial arts. You have to have a certain amount of toughness as well, toughness of the mind and being peaceful at the same time. So um, that's how I look at it. If you want the entire package, you got to go do a classical martial arts school. But I was glad to hear that you say, I am not teaching a martial arts school. This is a skilled school. So I really like that. I appreciate that as a classical martial artist.
So Sensei Johnson, before I ask Sensei Suino to answer the question about parents, I wonder if you have a response for Sensei Legacy or any thoughts as he was talking.
Well, this was a conversation that I had with Dan Anderson. And when he came down in St. Petersburg, Florida, after he had presented me with my 7th-degree black belt, and we were having conversations about classical traditional martial arts compared to skills. And as I mentioned, he wrote the article for Martial Arts Professional Magazine regarding skills. And his opening was that when we look at martial arts that have been around for 8,000 years, martial arts was created for countries to be able to defend their villages and defend themselves, and most of the people who were doing the defense were the younger male adults. So most of the traditional classical martial arts curriculum, or even the mindset, is built for that. Even just think of, like, military age people now, and which is great. Where I came in is as children's martial arts started to dominate martial arts schools, we transitioned from it being an adult dominated industry or activity, however you want to claim it, in the 70s and 80s. Then we had Karate Kid and the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers come out, and all these kids wanted to go in and learn martial arts, but kids are not equipped to be able to handle the rigors of traditional martial arts training physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. They don't have the skill sets to even do that. Sure, we could teach a child how to throw a punch and throw a kick, but if they don't have the skill sets, not just physically or intellectually, but mostly emotionally and socially, to throw those kicks and punches, it's not going to be effective when they're defending themselves. So that's where, that's why I like to, as I mentioned, sir, I like to separate skills from traditional martial arts and say that this is just using what the kids like about martial arts and putting it into a child development curriculum, so that although they want to be that awesome black belt they see on TV, it's not necessarily, not every kid. As a matter of fact, most kids don't have what it takes to become that martial artist at that young of an age, if that makes sense. We look at a 7-year-old, 8-year-old who wants to be like their sensei with these powerful techniques, being able to defend themselves against an aggressor or multiple people coming at them. And it's just not realistic for the average child, especially the average child today. Me growing up, I was born and raised in New Orleans. And I used to take the streetcar to downtown New Orleans, go to Cafe Du Monde, get a beignet, do my homework in Jackson Square. This was 5th grade. Jump back in the streetcar and then go to school. My mother's like, good luck. Hope you don't get beat up today. And I was bullied and harassed my entire journey throughout the day and never really had those conversations with my parents about it. Today, you can't do that with, today, even my son's friends can't come over without their parents texting me 20 times, how's my kid? So we are at a different generation when it comes to how kids are raised and what that looks like from being a traditional martial artist from the outside, looking in on is it realistic for the average child to be able to come into your dojo, go through all the rigors of the traditional martial arts training and become that black belt that can persevere through that rigorous test? And yes, maybe 1 in 100, if I'm giving kids credit, right? It's usually the anomaly these days that can handle it and not the majority. So then that's where I came in and said, how can we still have kids enjoy martial arts, at a majority level? And that's again how Skills was founded.
Yeah, I like that because I also think, Sensei Johnson, one of the things in traditional martial arts, we're always like, not everybody will be a black belt. Not every kid, not every adult, not every, like, and what you're saying is, hey, we're not even trying to make every person a black belt. We're trying to let them be the best they can be and using some martial arts skill sets to help them develop. So I
Yes, sir.
I
Yes, sir.
like what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a badge of honor, which I love. Not every kid, not everybody makes a black belt. I love that badge of honor. The problem is that kids go into these traditional martial arts schools and they go through rigorous training and it's too hard and then it's counterproductive for their growth and development because they couldn't, you know, hack it in the traditional martial arts classroom. So I just found that gap and started to focus and lean into that particular area of children's enticement when it comes to martial arts.
Love it. I'm just going to circle back to Sensei Suno quick about my parent question because he's been teaching for a long time too. And I'd like to hear his thoughts on how the parents have changed over the decades.
Before I get to
Have
that,
they? Maybe
before
they
I
have.
get to that, well, I'm really intrigued by this idea. The more I think about it, where skills sets in this pantheon, I confess I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of dumbing down martial arts to make it easier for people. We had a gal working at our front desk for a while at my dojo who went on to become an actuary. So her brain is tuned for this math and all that stuff. And she ran our stats. And it turned out 2% of the people that ever started at our dojo made black belt. Now, that's not because I didn't want them to be. I love giving out black belts, right? And I actually think we're kind and gentle. I don't think we don't do 6-hour black belt tests and we don't smash people in the face that often. Um, uh,
We
well, you might. But so it's funny you say the 1%, Sensei Johnson, because that's pretty close to what our stats actually work out to be. But um, um, I'm really comfortable, and I'm not saying this is my final opinion on it. I'm going to think about this, and I'm going to research, I'm going to read, look at your website, and I can see some value to this, both in terms of bringing it in to inform our existing martial arts programs for kids, and as a standalone program. And the more I think about it, the more I really like what it does. I think it stands in between. This is me spouting off, right? So there's not a formulated opinion, but if you got the martial arts over here and you've got sort of public schools over here, I kind of like where skills is in between that. I think that seems to resonate with you a little bit, right? Because the
Yes, sir.
schools are teaching some academics, but I'll tell you what, I can get on a soapbox, not so much about parents, but about schools. The schools around where I live have abdicated their responsibility for any kind of personal responsibility or moral growth on the part of the kids. Um, they run from that so fast. They don't hold the kids responsible. I don't, and this is an overgeneralization, of course, but it seems to me that what the teachers want to do is teach to this curriculum, and maybe they're forced to by the administration. I don't really know. But it seems like they've abdicated the responsibility to make sure that kids understand that if they want more, they have to work harder, or if they want more responsibility, they want more accolades, then they have to have more responsibility. I think that equation is missing. Um, and I also believe, because of the martial arts uh, influence, that physical education and mental education are closely linked. And this skills thing seems to kind of be that bridge. I really like that. And again, this is from an outside perspective. I haven't had time to really study it, but I love that. What I've seen from the parents, I'll tell you, I'm in a lucky place. I live in a very affluent community. Our enrollee body at JMAC is affluent, well educated, really hardworking people. By and large, I think the parenting is pretty good. But there's a segment of people that come to us initially, or maybe even for the long term, that I don't know if they can't or they won't, but they just don't know how to show their kids that equation I just described, that if the kids want more, they've got to work harder, or if the kids want more rights, they need to take more responsibilities. Just don't know how. And so sometimes that means tantrums and breakdowns. Sometimes that means kids that are just ineffective. They just don't know how to move forward in the world. We give them that in the martial arts, but it's probably not. We don't lead with that, right? I mean, the parents come to me and they say, "I want my kid to be more confident." All the things Randy talked about. Yes, easy answer. Yes, they're going to get it here, and 90% of them will get it. But the thing that's missing from some families, and I would say it's only 20% of the families at JMAC, is just that ability to show their kids the path forward to personal responsibility, to taking initiative, to feeling effective in the world and being able to accomplish what they want. And it seems to me that that skills program could really help with that. So I realize I just rambled on a lot, but that's my answer. That's my answer to two threads, bringing them both together.
I'm gonna just chime in on the teaching thing. I have a couple of teachers who are parents that like their kids train, and Sensei Johnson, this might be something I'd be interested again to hear your opinion on. Uh, a couple of the high school teachers pulled me aside and said, you have things figured out in here that high schools and grade schools could actually implement, and it has less to do with the physical training and more to do with the structure and the culture and the rule set, and how the teachers engage with the students. That being, we have stated 10 rules, and we have those 10 rules are known by and followed by everyone, teachers and students alike. And there are consequences for not following those rules. And when you don't follow the rules and you get the consequence, as soon as you pay your price, you're back in good standing. You are instantly back in good standing, and you're an awesome person, and you're back with. Whereas the teachers say that's not the case in schools today. They say, you start getting branded, you break the rule, you pay the price, but then you continue to pay the price forever. And as you said, Sensei, there's no like personal engagement or accountability with engaging with the most difficult students to help them become better. Um, what is your reaction to that statement, Sensei Johnson? Or any of these statements?
Any of the statements? Well, so I agree. Even with the educational system here in Florida, it's not very good. It's becoming very highly regulated. Even like what they teach in the curriculums in the public schools and so forth. I pay over $20,000 for my son to go to private school, and he's going into the fifth grade because of this, because I see the importance of having a really good education that has a sense of accountability. So I love the idea that you have these 10 rules, and if they break the rule, they have to suffer the consequence, but then immediately once they repair that, then they're back in. So I love that mindset. And with my son, I want to raise him in the type of environment that doesn't baby him, but also doesn't shame and criticize him. So again, going back to what SKILLZ does is we lean into helping them choose to work hard, choose to push forward, but we do it by desire versus by fear. So there was this corporate psychologist. This is one of the what really changed my mindset here was Dr. Douglas McGregor. He was a corporate psychiatrist out of MIT. And he studied corporate leadership, and he studied some of the most successful businesses and said that there was two types of leaders in the corporate world. There were these theory X leaders and these theory Y leaders, and then everybody fits on the spectrum. Theory X corporate leaders believe that their employees need to be threatened, coerced, shamed, and punished, held accountable in order for them to reach high levels of their role as an employee. Theory Y believe the opposite. Theory Y believe that employees, through encouragement and through motivation and inspiration, these employees would perform at high standards. So to give you an example, if you don't get your report to me by the end of the week, you're not getting your bonus. If you don't meet your quota by the end of the month, you will not get that promotion. If you don't meet your quota on a regular basis, then you don't have job security. You can lose your job. That's theory X. And theory Y is, if you get your report to me by Friday, you will get that bonus. If you meet your quota by the end of the month, you will get that promotion. And if you keep meeting your quota, you will have job security. So the way that I approach martial arts is the exact same way. So for example, telling a child, hey, look, you have to do your form 10 times if you even want it to be at the level that will put you at a caliber where you can compete at districts and become a world champion. That's kind of coercion, right? And what we do is we do a different mindset. Listen, the bare minimum doing your form is I want you to do it 5 times. But if you want to push yourself and make me proud, I want you to do it 7 times. But if you want to be world champion quality, if you want to get to the point where you can compete at districts level, then do your form 10 times. So then they choose to do it 10 times. The exact same goal, but how you approach it in that way. Another example is my son. Unfortunately, my son was not blessed with the martial arts gene. He does not want to do martial arts. I've tried everything with him. He's a team sports guy. So he's flag football and he's soccer. And in order for him, or in his tryouts last season, they had to do 15 juggles with keeping the ball in the air. And so here's my son in the living room trying to do juggles, and he get the 5, he get the 7, and he just wasn't making it. And he just was crying, and it's just like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not going to make the next team. I'm not going to be able to move up. And I said, listen, buddy, here's what I want you to do. I just want you to do 50 juggles, even if it touches the ground. Just kick the ball in the air, keep it in the air, and you'll build that spatial awareness and that foot-eye coordination. And I said, you know what? If you feel like you really want to challenge yourself and give yourself an even better edge, I want you to do it 75 times. I said, but if you really are committed to making this team, then do 100 juggles, and you'll notice that you'll be able to keep it up in the air more as you do 100 juggles every single day. He said, Mom, I'm going to do 150 on his own. So he chose to do even higher. So that's the behavior by desire. That's how we approach teaching our kids on the mat. So it's called the hierarchy of intrinsic motivation. It's one of the teaching skills we use, and it triggers the dopamine. So we give them these low barrier options, but then we say, but if you want to make me proud, add more reps. But if you want to make yourself proud and be at the highest level performer in this classroom, then choose this. So then, because it's their choice, that's what pushes them out of their comfort zone. That's just kind of one of the examples that we utilize when we're teaching kids.
Yeah, I like how you said it's basically what we were talking about before, right? Where you use fear and threat to do something, and just it's not really different. You're just reframing it, right? You're just
Yes.
reframing it in a more palatable way for them. Instead of getting them to move back, they're moving forward instead of moving back. I love that.
Yes, sir.
Sensei Legacy, I feel like I might have cut you off a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity if I did.
Well, I just have a couple of things to say. I hope I'm not off target there. Uh, you're saying that again, I'm a martial artist, so it's the only way I can answer this, right? So you're saying that young people, nowadays, again, it's what I said before, it was the law. Nowadays, the children are not up to that, but that's what bullies do, right? They use that physical part and come into you. You have to realize that because there's a law, that's why it's the skills of the time. Miyamoto Musashi killed his first person, an adult, by the time he was 13 years old. So he had to be doing the skills before that. And then he went on to have 60 fights and never lost a fight. I mean, he only let one guy in go because he accidentally touched him with his bow. So it's the law of the day that really dictates what you should be doing. And the last thing is about sports. And again, I respect what you said, right? I'm standing up for the martial arts, how it has everything for sport, has everything for skills. It's built in there, right? So, like say for instance, and it's good for everyone to play sports. I agree, but the up and down side of it is, if you go out and play baseball, you get some good skills and everything, but because you play baseball doesn't mean you can be a football player, right? Well, and in martial arts, what it does is build you from the inside out. It builds the toughness to play any sport. It builds the psychology to play any sports. So it's a bit of a life thing as opposed to being a specific skill, you know. And again, I just don't want you to think I'm saying anything against your your teachings, but I find that martial arts really holds 99.9% of what everybody's speaking about.
I do not disagree with you, sir. I 100%. And I would like to say if I had to design children today to have the right physical, intellectual, and emotional and social skill sets, I would design it where every child does martial arts and they have that mindset and that skill set and those abilities to be a phenomenal martial artist, even by the age of 13. Unfortunately, those are anomalies, and that's not the average child today. It's not even the average, above average child today that are equipped. And yes, it is time. Yes, it is the time that we're in. Earlier generations, they had the skill sets to do it, and I think even children way down deep underneath, they may have some of the skill sets, but when we look at it from a science perspective, like proprioceptive senses, vestibular senses, young children, they don't have those senses today. As a matter of fact, there was just a study that was done recently that I read through FLACY, it's the Florida Academics reports, and preschoolers started saying, I don't know about anybody else, but have you noticed kids are falling out of their chairs recently? This is a true epidemic. Children in preschools are falling out of their chairs 40% more than they were prior to COVID. And the reason why is because children are not outside playing as much as they were before. And when you play in the playground and you do the monkey bars and the balance beams, you're developing those proprioceptive senses where their body is in space. You're developing those vestibular senses, which is your balance. And vestibular is not really physical. It's definitely in your mind as well. What I mean by that is if I put a 2x4 on the ground, I can walk across it back and forth without letting my foot touch the ground. But if I raise that 2x4 to the ceiling and had to walk across that 2x4, I'm going to start to feel very unsteady. So children, because now they're spending more time indoors and they're addicted to their devices and iPads, they're not developing those senses. So even just vestibular and proprioceptive senses are way below or way behind compared to children before COVID, or way behind before tablets were invented, where children that keep children indoors as compared to, when we grew up. I grew up in the generation where my mother said, don't come home until the streetlights come on. So I was outside riding my bike, playing in the woods, playing in the forts, and that's just not children today, the majority of children. So the expectations need to be adapted because of that, unfortunately. Like I said, I wish that it weren't that way, but it is. So and so we have to think about how we train children today, keeping those things in mind of where they fall behind compared to where we were. And the expectations that we have should actually be the goals, not the standard. And unfortunately, I notice it a lot, especially with martial arts schools that I work with. We talked about forms training, and I was saying that kindergartners and first graders right now, their inductive thinking, their pattern recognition, their category formation is definitely very off these days compared to even 20 years ago. So children ages 5 and 6, they struggle with doing even like a 22 move form. And I had one guy in one of my audiences, he argued with me and said, every one of my kids in my class can do a 22 move form that are under the age of 6. And I was like, that means that they're above their intellectual stage of development and their physical stage of development of being able to do these things. And I asked him how many kids he had in class, and he said 3. And I was like, well, then that should be the goal, not the expectation. But the problem is that because he had 1 or 2 kids who could do that 22 move form, he expected everybody, other kid, to be at that same ability. And if they weren't, it's because they were lazy or the parents weren't pushing them hard enough, or is something wrong on the kid and not looking that it's their stage of development. It is the science. And that's what a lot of martial arts instructors struggle with now, is if you have one good person at that age, you want everybody else to live up to that standard. And although it's ideal, it's not realistic when it comes to being able to run a program that's sustainable for children that retain them for extended periods of time.
Unfortunately, right now, after the world wars, everything sort of took a little dip. The parents want to take care of their children, um, and the laws and everything. But what's happening right now, you probably notice there's a new type of violence, the gangs, the groups, the knife attacks, all those. It's becoming to be dangerous to even walk down the street nowadays.
Uh, okay, I feel like we could go on with these conversations for hours. I would enjoy it too. We just time is real, as Sean Benson says, and we have these 10 questions, Sensei Johnson, that we like to ask
Sure.
everybody who comes on. They're very martial arts based, so we're gonna lean on your martial arts background when we ask you these 10 questions. And we ask you to answer as impulsively as you like or elaborate as much as you want, but we're going to cut you off after 10 minutes. So you got 10 minutes to answer 10 questions. And since we're going to go back and forth on asking you these questions, and I'm going to hit start on a timer as soon as and listen, sometimes,
Put my timer on too, just so
okay,
I can
Cross check us.
sometimes we'll start like chiming in on asking you questions. And then if we screw you up, then we'll give you more time. Okay.
Oh no.
Right on.
I will give you more time. So the first question is, what is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
Foot or hand?
It's your call.
No.
Your
So for me, sidekick was always when I would spar was my most powerful martial arts move because of my size. In the ATA organization, we compete based on age and not based on weight, like a lot of other martial arts divisions. So, you haven't seen me in person, but I'm 5'0" and I weigh 102 pounds. So me sparring somebody 5'9" who's like 155 pounds. I this my sidekick is the most effective way to keep them from being able to charge in on me.
love it.
Sensei, who's the most influential martial artist in your life?
The most it was Super Dan Anderson. Obviously, his passion for martial arts, his theories in sparring were some of the things that inspired me to want to compete. And even though I never won a world title in sparring, it definitely put me on the map in my industry because, like I said, I was always the underdog. So when I won, people were like, if I busted a nose or something, or one time I had my teeth knocked out in Vegas, and I still was able to win the match based on a lot of his theories. So I would say Super Dan Anderson is my biggest inspiration.
We like that answer.
Yeah,
I like that answer.
yeah.
Um, so the next question is, who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time and why?
Well, I hope that you guys don't shrug, but I mean, I'm gonna go mainstream and stick with Bruce Lee because
Sensei Legacy said. Sensei Legacy
he's
said.
okay. He's was able to bring martial arts into the mainstream here in the United States and influence people and his skills and abilities. He was that anomaly that if we could make every single student walk through the door have the same physical abilities and mindset, then wow, how fun would that be for our industry?
Great answer.
Thank you.
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your martial arts training?
What excites me the most about the next 5 years is knowing that with AI technology taking over so many people's jobs over the course of the next 2 years, jobs and services that are going to be more valuable are the things that include human to human connection. So, for example, I have two friends who own radiology businesses here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and they're going to be out of jobs in the next 2 years because AI is going to be able to read those MRI scans and X-rays with much higher proficiency than what they can. So they need to pivot and figure out what to do. And as AI technology takes over jobs, people like martial arts instructors that have that human to human connection with both kids and adults are going to be even more in high demand, especially if you're very, very, very good at building upon those human to human connections in high level ways. So I see our industry starting to become more in high demand, which means that we can not that I want to integrate greed into this, but we can command higher prices to be able to feed for our families, because right now a lot of martial arts school owners are very underpaid for what they do.
That's going to be the clickbait, Sensei Johnson, for this episode. It's going to be how martial arts overcomes AI.
Yes, sir.
That's what we're going to put under your picture. Um, my question for you though is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Well, first, I'd like for him to give me a glass of his finest red wine, because we know he invented it. And I would hope that when I show up to him, he goes, "You're not done yet," and I get to become an angel, and I can still pursue my purpose of changing lives in positive ways by pursuing an angelic career.
Love it.
Question number 6. Do you have a favorite film or TV martial artist, whether in real life they actually do martial arts or not?
A favorite film? Well, I mean, this is such an unfair question, because there's so many martial artists that are both my personal friends, but also actors who have inspired me, in my lifetime. Ernie Reyes Jr. is a personal friend of mine. So I grew up with Surf Ninjas, and I grew up with Ninja Turtles, so I love seeing him. And then, of course, the late Jason David Frank, he and I were personal friends, and what he did in Power Rangers was always very fun. But then I also grew up with Jackie Chan and the Drunken Master from back in the day. And, Bloodsport was like I remember my Uncle Danny, he was in his 20s, and he had the VHS tape, and he lived with my grandmother. So whenever I went over there, we'd sneak and watch it, so my parents didn't know that I was watching it. So there's just so many. It's really hard to answer that question.
Well, you answered it in a few ways. I have a friend who always says, everything I need to know about martial arts, I learned from Bloodsport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brick when he did the dim mock, I thought that that's what I was doing when I did that spin hook kick, and I still have the scar on my ankle.
Awesome.
Sensei Johnson, do you have a martial artist, living or dead, of all time that you wish you could have trained with?
Well, definitely Bruce Lee, 100%.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What would you do? What would that training session be like?
So I'm very big into mindset. And the way that he would teach with theory and philosophy, not just the physical rigors of it, but you have to have that right mindset in order to accomplish anything. Like, even now, I do a bullying management course, and I talk about, my son, when he started wearing glasses last year, he was nervous that he was going to get picked on. And I could tell him everything they need to do to stand up to other kids, like, stand up for yourself, tell them to stop, tell the teacher, whatever. But if he doesn't have the confidence and the skill sets to be able to apply those lessons, then they're not going to be effective. So I believe that if I had an opportunity to train with Bruce Lee, a lot of the value I'd get is from that mindset part of, how do I push myself when I'm outside of my comfort zone? As I mentioned, doing that half marathon, we're a lot tougher than we think. And with the right mentors and the right people encouraging us and leading us in that direction, that's where you're going to accomplish much greater things in whatever craft you're doing. So for me, as a martial arts enthusiast, I believe that he would just tap into my soul at a much deeper level. That would be really, really exciting.
Nice. So here's question number 8. If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit that you've gotten from martial arts training, regardless of whether they actually train in martial arts or not, what benefit would that be?
So I always say that I used to say that martial arts saved my life or changed my life. And now I say teaching martial arts changed my life and saved my life. So the benefit of being able to share my passion and purpose with others is something that I wish that, everybody could experience.
The last 2 questions come as a pair. You're doing great too, by the way.
Okay, we got 2 minutes left
Yeah,
too.
you got
See,
2
check
minutes
it out.
Tracking us.
We're on.
What is your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret?
My greatest achievement in martial arts.
It's your answer, Sensei.
Oh, my greatest achievement. I like to say that my greatest achievement is being a female in what was considered a male-dominated martial arts industry in the 90s, and being able to be accepted when I wrote my Little Ninja program, which, in the 90s, if we remember, like in the early 90s, it was Shumen's martial arts. How can I help you? Yeah, I want to do martial arts for my kid. How old is your child? 6. Click. So when I wrote the Little Ninja program, which was for 3 to 6 year olds, and I started doing these seminars, I'd have these traditional martial artists standing there with their arms folded, going, I'm not playing games with kids, to becoming some of like the most enthusiastic. My first Little Ninja seminars I did in LA. This guy comes up to me, big bald dude, muscles, black fingernails, black toenails, and he said, "Your Little Ninja program is my favorite class to teach." This was Chuck Liddell before he became a UFC fighter. So to me, that's my biggest accomplishment, is having these big MMA like guys running my kids' program and being excited that the little ones are my favorite class.
I trained with Chuck one time. His toenails and fingernails were blue.
He changed his colors.
It was
Him and
just
John
after.
Hackelman, those are cool guys. Going on to the next, what's my biggest regret is not wearing my mouthpiece in that Vegas Nationals. Well, I left my mouthpiece at home, and I had to buy one, and it was all they had were adult sizes. It didn't fit my mouth, and it wasn't. This was like in the late 90s, and it was cutting my gums. I go into sudden victory against this girl. I spit my mouthpiece out because it was cutting my gums, and the ref was like, "You sure you want to do that?" I was like, "I got this." Stepped into a side kick. She knocked several of my teeth out. I was 21 at the time, and I was there in Vegas for a week still after that with no teeth. That was the biggest regret. I'll never not wear a mouthpiece ever again.
Love it. And right at the wire. I just ended the
Yep.
timer. You were gonna hit it.
I tried my best to push us over.
So what we like to do now, Sensei Johnson, is just go around the horn quickly about our time with you and our thoughts. The last word will go to you, and then we'll end the feed. Before we do that, we always like to give some thanks to the people behind the scenes who are helping us with this. People like Robert Shlumsky, Andrei Sedyshev, Justin Shea, Dan Holland, Christiana Landolt, Stavros Stravulius, Dridi Giuliani, and Emily Ruth Driscoll. Those are the people that help us, and we couldn't do this without them. Sensei Suino, what do you want to say about our time with Sensei Johnson today?
Well, I had a great time. I like the fact that we mixed it up a little bit about traditional versus modern stuff. I like kind of the answers you gave us. I really like the fact that we can have that conversation with you, Sensei, and know that you're also a badass. So it's not just intellectual stuff, right? You're not just talking the game. That you've been through the mix, and you're physical as well. That's encouraging. It's an important part of the whole conversation for me. Had a super good time. This went by in a flash for me, and I really enjoy the fact that we had a real conversation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sensei Legacy, what do you want to say about your time with Sensei Johnson?
I also enjoyed it. It's nice to see that some people are putting the modern day vision of martial arts. And you're right, not every person is going to go to a martial arts school, especially if they're a meek or a mild-mannered person, where you may take them across that gap so that they can at least gain the confidence or possibly even go to martial arts when they get older. So I got a bit of an education here myself, and I appreciate that. Thank you for
Thank you, sir.
coming on our show.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Sensei Johnson, I want to also say thank you so much for coming on the show. A couple of things I would note. I like the stuff that you did in martial arts, and I really like your SKILLZ program. Like I'm going to be thinking about it a lot. I might email you a couple more questions after this, if that's okay.
Sure.
As well, I would say you have like an awesome energy about you. It's the energy that you have is very safe energy. So even when I felt like some of the things were like spicy, or we are going to ask some questions that maybe you were so like good about accepting those questions and not railing against them, and just staying on track with what you believe and what you really care about, which I really respect that a lot. And I hope a lot of people watch this show. We'll get your information. We'll put it in the comments so that people can get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you about your program or have you come in to do some speaking. But the time just flew. I can't believe an hour and a half has gone by so quickly. And it's been a very enjoyable hour and a half. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for your time. Yeah. So the last word goes to you before we end the show.
Well, I'm gonna get a selfie so that I can tell everybody. All right. Well, thank you guys for having me. And I love teaching martial arts to children when it comes to the skills and the play-based theories. And a lot of the people that I work with in our industry are definitely more the newer age people, not from the traditional martial arts that we grew up in. So when I have an opportunity to speak with real martial artists, I love it because I could talk martial arts all day. We don't even have to talk about skills. We could talk about, Bloodsport and Bruce Lee and tell our stories of our rigorous testings and things. So that's really my inner passion, my deep passion. So thank you for, lighting up that spirit. It makes me want to go to a dojo right now and do some traditional training. So I appreciate that. And thank you for having me.
Very well. Thanks, everybody who'll be watching this. Thanks for joining in.
Thanks,
Yes, sir.
everybody.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Sensei.
Bye.